All right. Hey, Colin, what did the Ramones say?
Joey Ramone said, hey, let's go.
Hello, our legendary friends. We want to thank you for joining us for another fantastic episode of Legends and Losers. How are you, Colin?
I'm doing great, but the cameras are all a little wonky here because you look like you're in a lowrider. and
I'm just sitting back.
And I'm on a chopper or something like that. And I need to fix this.
Okay, you couldn't have fixed the camera before we went live. Well, this must be another episode of Legends and Losers. We want to thank you because you've made us a hit show, and it's clearly because of things like this. This is just riveting.
We should start over.
This is just riveting radio and television right here. But with all seriousnity, we do.
Hey, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriosity.
Yeah,
I've never heard that. I've never heard you say that before.
Seriousness and generosity at the same time. With all
is that what it is?
Seriosity.
With all but you say in all seriousness, but right, which you don't say it in all generosity. So
no, we're being serious and generous at the same time. Could you be that?
I like that.
Seriosity.
It's a great word.
What was the other word we came up with the other day? Oh,
very
virability.
Virable?
Virable. That's it.
Virable.
When it's viable
and viral,
it's virable. All right.
All right.
So we continue to hack the greatest minds in Silicon Valley and the greatest minds in marketing. And we have somebody with us today who is both of those things.
Yes, we do.
Do you want to tell our legendary friends who's on the show today, Colin?
Yes, I do. Blair Shane.
Yeah, and Blair is the chief marketing officer, and she's a partner at Sequoia Capital, one of the preeminent firms. And we have a great discussion with her, don't we?
Yes, so where our friend Jim Getz is from as well.
Yes, and we have many friends there. And actually, I don't want to spill those beans. Anyway, we'll get to her in a second. I want to do a shout out to, doing the show, I use these headphones that our dear friend John Burdoff gave me, these LSTN headphones that are very steezy. And when I'm not wearing those, I wear these earbuds from this company called One More Life,
because they don't die.
Well, yeah, it's this. They should rename this 9 Lives.
They should.
So I really like these earbuds, and I left them in my jeans, and my wife put them in the washing machine.
As she does.
As she does. God bless her. And so she washed them and dried them, and I discovered them, and I didn't know where they were.
And she dried them.
I believe it was both, yes. And I thought, well, that's the end of that.
That's almost 2 lives right there.
And so they were great. And then she left this candle up here in the studio. And so we had the candle on, or I guess lit on.
Yeah, with the candle on.
With the candle on. And my One More earbuds, the cords got lit on fire.
Whoa. I love how you avoid all responsibility here.
No, I was sitting right here, and the candle leapt. It reminds me, my mother-in-law, years. Stay with me.
Where are we going here?
Stay with me. My mother-in-law several years ago backed into a fire hydrant, and she smashed in her back bumper.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was telling me about it after the fact, she explained that she didn't want to drive right now because she was feeling a little nervous because she'd just been hit by the fire hydrant and she wasn't over it yet.
That's exactly what you're doing right here.
A little bit of that.
Yeah.
So I burned the earbud cord.
Yeah. On not just burned, it was on fire. It was
lit,
flaming, and
blew this thing out. And these earbuds still work. So these One More guys are this product's incredible.
Indestructible earbuds.
Indestructible. And also wanted to touch on, because we're talking marketing today with Blair, interesting new data. You know how much I love data.
Yes.
So marketingweek.com, quote, a third of marketers hired more staff in the first quarter. Almost a third of marketers said they were looking to hire new staff over first quarter of this year. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Was that noteworthy?
I thought it was noteworthy. And then they went on to say that a little bit later on in the article that marketers are forecasting ongoing growth over the coming year. Some 41% of senior marketers are predicting expanded marketing budgets in 2017, while only 15% foresee a decline. And ad spend for the year has been revised up to 0.6% after previously being expected to dip by 0.7%. Imagine working at that level of precision for a forecast. Yeah. Well, there you have it. All right. Well, why don't you tell our legendary friends about Blair?
Well, as you mentioned, Blair is the CMO and a partner at Sequoia Capital, where she's responsible for building Sequoia's global brand and helping to build the enduring companies of tomorrow. Sequoia is one of few preeminent Silicon Valley venture firms, and Sequoia's founder, Don Valentine, is one of the pioneering fathers of the category. Sequoia has backed some of the most legendary companies in technology in history, including Apple, Oracle, Yahoo, Google, YouTube, PayPal, LinkedIn, Palo Alto Networks, WhatsApp, Airbnb, and Zoom, to name a few. Before Sequoia, Blair was the Associate Dean and Chief Marketing Officer at Stanford Graduate School for Business. She's an executive with 20 years of leadership and marketing experience. She's open, captivating, and straight-talking. Now, our dialogue with the legendary Blair Shane.
You know, I was thinking about this. So for me, on a personal level, being legendary means changing the world for the better. And along my career, I've tried to put myself in situations to do that, with the ultimate goal of doing one of three things: either being a peace negotiator in the Middle East in the long run, being a CEO, or being a teacher. And with all those three things in mind, I find that they come to play in the day-to-day. So how I intersect with the legendary today at Sequoia is very directly, because our mission is to help the daring build legendary companies. And so each and every day, I get to partner with those founders, those independent thinkers, those true believers who are resolute in their desire to build a company that will transform our market and the world.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love that you equate entrepreneur, CEO, peace negotiator, and teacher in the same domain.
Yeah.
And you know, if any outfit in Silicon Valley was worthy of using the word legendary, it's Sequoia. So remind me, Blair, how long you've been at Sequoia?
So I've been at Sequoia about 3.5 years. So not nearly the 40 years ago when Don Valentine started the company, but he still really is the inspiration for backing a very, very, very small set of companies that are going to change the world.
And I tell people all the time that Don's one of my heroes, and I consider him to be, if not the, certainly one of the principal category designers of venture capital in our industry. And I'm trying to remember now to make sure I get it right.
Right.
Some of the very early checks he wrote were to two guys named Steve, right?
Correct.
And they started a little company that today I believe is still the most valuable company in the world, is it not?
I would suspect that Apple is. And then, others like Larry Page of Google, and then more recent, whether it's Elon Musk. In those days, it was PayPal. Folks like Jan Koum of WhatsApp, Jack Dorsey today. And then the ones that I really like, everybody talks about the legendary founders of the last 30, 40 years.
Wasn't Larry Ellison a fairly early investment for Don as well?
Completely.
Founder of Oracle?
and, then more recent companies. And the ones that, again, I'm going to just bring it forward. It's interesting. Is the definition of legend really someone who is, we worked with 20 or 30 years ago, or can you truly state that there's a legend in the making? So I like to work with the legends in the making.
And you help make them legends, don't you, Blair?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can claim that much credit, but when I look...
Well, I can. I know you do.
So, yeah, and when I look at folks who, those extremely rare people, whether it's Adi Tatako of House or Brian Chesky of Airbnb or Julia Hartz, who I saw last night of Eventbrite, it's just so inspiring to see that their goals aren't just to make money. Their goals are really to bring a product and service that will change the world. And by having that long-term vision and with Sequoia at their back, trying to build an enduring company, I'm pretty convinced that they are legends in the making.
And, when you guys meet new or young entrepreneurs, how do you figure out who's a legend in the making and who's a loser in the making?
It's such a tough one. So certainly an idea that transforms a market needs to be, this is so common, needs to be based on a true heartfelt pain point or a customer need. And then when it comes to the people, I think of it more of a psychographic. So Mike Moritz, a long time ago, we have an ethos on our website, but he wrote these words that are truly the words. It's not that you're great at B2B. It's not that you're a serial entrepreneur. He wrote the words, they're the creative spirits, the underdogs, they're resolute, they're defiant, they're the outsiders, they're the fighters, the true believers. It goes on, but you get the sense of it's a grit and a determination. It's a combination of intellect and work ethic. And the other thing in all of that is the fact that there's enough ego to push and realize the full potential of a massive idea, but they are never, as individuals, bigger than that idea. And the legends that I think of in the world are never bigger than the idea that they're trying to manifest in the world.
Interesting. Is that another way of saying that they're way more committed to the idea than to their own ego?
I'm sorry, you just broke up in the second part of that, Chris.
Does that mean that, is that another way of saying they're much more committed to the mission than their own ego?
I think it is, that they're mission driven, that it's the idea that fuels them, not their desire for fame or wealth.
Yeah. I remember a couple of years ago, I was writing a blog for Fortune. I can't remember exactly what the topic was, but I remember talking to Jim about it and using a quote from him. And the quote was something like, we seek mission-driven founders who can build both a category and a company, a great category and a great company at the same time. If it wasn't that, it was very close to that. But I will never forget the mission-driven founders.
I think that that's huge. And I think it's as a marketer, I never like to assume that I'm anywhere close to being our target or understanding the psychographic of a target. It's dangerous to think, God forbid, you could stand in their shoes. But when I think of, in our ethos as an organization at Sequoia, we say we value teamwork over showmanship. I think that's one piece that comes up, which is very consistent with the founders that we back. And I think the second thing is, our purpose at Sequoia is, yes, to help the daring build legendary companies, but we're also very committed to great causes, in that about 70% of our limited partners are nonprofits like universities or hospitals or foundations.
Yep.
And so I think that's it too. Certainly, we want to fuel this business for the long run, but it's with the ability that in doing so, there are scholarships that are created and cures to diseases happening. So I do think you're right. It's the mission-driven belief of the founder, the mission-driven belief of this organization that is not just about making money, but it's making money for a purpose and doing so by building companies that last.
Yeah, that was the other word I sort of always associate with Sequoia is that word enduring. I always remember that word coming out of particularly Jim Getz's mouth. But
I mean, it's definitely the symbolism. I mean, there's a reason why Valentine it's not Valentine Capital for a reason, right?
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. And actually, I think even more than that, I don't actually think there's anything wrong with putting your name on the door. I think there's something that's been the secret to our success, which is Sequoia is our name. So obviously one of the largest, if not the largest, natural object in nature being the sequoia tree lasting hundreds and hundreds of years. I think of the heft and strength of a sequoia tree, but the fact that it also starts small. And then if you think of the rings, the rings, as each one grows out, it's not just age, but it's learning. And so the tribal knowledge that we're able to learn in each and every company that we partner with, and then apply the best of it year after year after year. And that symbolism is meaningful, and it's also the symbolism of it's never ending. I mean, if a sequoia tree, it'll live on for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
As these companies should.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I had a dialogue recently with a guy named Christian Anschutz, who's a former Marine entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And now chief digital officer at UL, the big safety and testing company. And he talked about that exact topic as well, because UL is, I want to say it's a 140-year-old company. Maybe it's 120 years old, but it's in that range. And you don't talk to people very often who work at 120-year-old companies, do you?
You certainly don't. And I think, we talk about all the time how it's, with the influx of capital and technology, as you know better than anybody, it's easier and easier every day to start a company. I actually think it's harder and harder to build one that lasts, because it requires that independent thinker with a super provocative idea one. Then it requires the drive to move fast and, create a team around you that is going to make a difference. And then because companies can stay private longer, it takes longer and kind of more resilience, more determination now than ever to get to being public and then sustaining, just because that time horizon is longer than it's ever been.
Yeah, it's interesting. Why do you think so many companies are waiting longer than the traditional trajectory we saw in Silicon Valley, certainly in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s? What do you think's going on there?
I think it's one, the access to capital prior to going public is just so much more plentiful. So I think it's really, there's no need to go sooner than you need to. And then the desire to, make your product and service as proficient as possible before you go. Those are my two hypotheses, is you just aren't forced to, and it gives you more time. I think the con of it is an original entrepreneur and their team, it's just a sprint for a marathon's length of time versus what it was before.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You may remember, and you guys were in our huge help to us in bringing our book Play Bigger to the world. In the book, of course, we unveil some research we call the 610 law. And we did this research. It says essentially the companies that create all the enduring value go public, at least in the tech space, between 6 and 10 years of age. And we have a hypothesis as to why that is. But it's interesting. There are a lot of companies that are sitting near or at the outer edge of that 6-10 window, sweet spot, if you will. I believe, you tell me if you think I'm wrong or fucked up, but that waiting too long is a really big problem for a lot of these companies.
Well, and I think you could be right. I think that it'll be interesting to see if it changes, mostly because I think it's very rare to have an original founder and team be able to exert the energy required past that to innovate and get stronger. And so I think you're right. I still think the 6 to 10 year mark seems to be the right one. I just think you're right. It's on the outer edge. I think it's more 8 to 10 years. And then there's a question of, if it's beyond 10 years, did you miss your window?
Yeah.
Do you have the endurance to just keep going?
Yeah. I mean,
opens.
The data says it's the companies that go public at 6 to 10 years of age that produce the enduring value. That's what the data research says. And my partners at Play Bigger just actually did an update of that data, and the 610 law is holding. The interesting thing, all these companies that are waiting, they almost feel like, millennial 30-year-old millennials who won't leave the house, right? There's a flip side to the IPO thing being a negative, which is it forces a set of discipline and a set of rigor.
Right.
And the thing that we think more qualitatively is that what's going on here is it probably takes about 6 to 10 years to get a category to really develop, to make that category tip, and to solidify a position, if not as the de facto category king, certainly the emerging category king. And if you get public in that sweet spot, then you can take a bunch of investors in the public markets on a further ride up the curve, if you will, up the category growth curve, and therefore revenue and bookings and EBITDA and all the good stuff, right? But if you wait too long and you do that ride up the category curve, even if you're a category king, then what are you going to be able to deliver to investors in terms of that ride up that category curve?
Right. And extracting enough value at that stage to then fuel your next, steep slope learning curve is essential. So, it's optimizing both the slope of the line and the inflection point itself. Yeah.
So maybe switching gears a little bit, Blair. How does Blair Shane get to be Blair Shane? I mean, you have what I describe to people as if somebody had offered me your job when I was, in my 30s.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have thought, and I think it probably would have been true, that I had literally died and gone to heaven. I mean, you are the head of marketing for, if not the most, certainly one of the most storied firms.
Yep.
In our world.
Yeah.
So how does one become, walk me through the story of how Blair gets to be Blair and where you are today.
It's really not all that interesting. So the funny thing
come on. I don't believe that.
The funny thing is I was not looking to be the head of marketing at Sequoia Capital. And a few people, Jim Gatz, Rulaf Bota, Araf Halali, found me. And people sometimes ask, Blair, why even do you have a job? Sequoia, they don't need a head of marketing. And to tell you the truth, it was even harder before, because I ran marketing at Stanford Business School, and people said, Blair, you must have the easiest job in the world. What do you need to do to market Stanford? And maybe why I end up...
This is your second job in a row that some people think doesn't even need to be a job? Is that...
Yeah, they think not only do I have the easiest thing in the world, but, why do they pay me at all?
Are you the category queen then of marketing jobs where there's no marketing requirement?
that quite possibly is so. But on the other side, I think why I end up here, and for anybody looking for a job like this, or more importantly, for a brand like this, is I end up at brands that don't want to rest on their laurels for one reason. Because I bring a significant amount of passion and discipline for not letting the organization rest on its laurels. So at the end of the day, I'm probably a better change agent or general manager than I am marketer. In that I'm probably in this job because I help Sequoia realize when we are being lazy. And if we really want to continue to be that category king or market leader. And I think in your description of your podcast, you talk about dominating. And I'm not sure how much I personally like the word dominating, because I think if you believe you are dominating, you get lazy and you get weak. So how I ended up in this job is I keep us on our toes. I keep us looking forward at what our existing founders want and need and what the next generation wants, so that we're pushing change before we have to. Because otherwise, I actually think we'll just die. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be 5 years, but if we don't force our own change, we'll be dead in 10.
it's so interesting, because you're right. With both organizations, Stanford Business School and now Sequoia, nobody would think that. I'm reminded years ago when I was a kid, I read a book, and I forget the name of the author, but it was a very important book for me. It was called Mentally Tough. And it was if I'm not mistaken, the author is a sports psychologist, because he talks a lot about that. And he talked about how legends tilt reality. So, for example, he talked about Martina Navratilova, the famous tennis player, probably the greatest tennis player ever, and certainly one of them. Anyway, and how when she was winning, when she was close to winning a match, she would alter her reality in her head and try to play like she was coming from behind, because she knew that if she was playing like she had a 4-game lead in the set or the match or wherever she was, that she might back off from that. So is part of your job trying to get Sequoia to forget that it's Sequoia?
I think it's a little bit of everyone in the office is a little bit paranoid. And just also truthfully, Don and then Michael and Doug and Jim and the existing partners here, whether it's Roelof or Alfred or Pat, they created this incredible thing, and no one wants to let Don down, and no one wants to let our limited partners down. So we're all here with tremendous purpose. And I think we lack hubris, or we try to lack hubris, in that it's a combination of listening to the outside world. And if you want to stay ahead, you need to be willing to change, even if things are working well. So I think it's just a constant desire to change ourselves before someone else forces us to. And we're not always perfect. There's many things that I think we probably should have done something about a long time ago that we still have some institutional inertia around.
I find that hard to believe given Sequoia's track record, but I'll take your word for it. And so you've now become this master of taking brands who dominate in their categories and sharpening their edge, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of just helping the organization know who they are, focusing, and then not being unashamed to tell the world what they are. I'm a big believer you can't be everything to everybody. And if a leader can, whether in marketing or not, can help the organization see who they are and then match the audience with that very clear message, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. I remember a conversation you and I had several years ago, I think when you were fairly new as the CMO of Sequoia. And I can't remember how you said it, but I remember sort of your sensitivity around Sequoia not wanting to pound its chest, not wanting to celebrate Sequoia, but to celebrate the entrepreneurs and the companies. And how do you market a firm who doesn't want to talk about its successes as its successes? And so how do you do that? How do you say to the world, hey, or, the next generation of entrepreneurs come out, hey, Sequoia is fucking Sequoia, don't forget it, kind of thing. But at the same time, there's this humble warrior that is deeply part of the DNA. So how do you market an organization that wants to be humble and actually wants to be more in the background and have entrepreneurs and the companies more in the foreground?
I think the most important thing is to focus on performance and to focus on the track record and let your deeds and results stand for themselves. And, Sequoia is not building these companies. We're helping these incredible, daring, legendary founders build their companies. So, one, we just let the track record stand for itself. Two, I would say we help founders at crucible moments. We're not a big content shop. We're not a big service shop. We are consistent. We like to partner with founders and companies super early. One of the myths I try to dispel, and I haven't been very good at it, is we do not want you to practice and come to Sequoia when you're ready. We would love to meet you as early as possible. Because
you want entrepreneurs who are still got a lot of failing left to do.
We definitely do. And we definitely want to hear the idea. And we'd rather have be able to have an open and honest dialogue on when the right time is to partner than to have people say, oh, I'm not ready, I'll come and talk to you later. Because the reality is some of the companies we partnered with the earliest, whether that's, Stripe or Airbnb or Carbon, we partnered with really, really early because I think our secret sauce is partnering with an organization early, a founder early, and then at crucible moments, whether that's at the very beginning of the journey or near the end, being able to come to a company with a team of experts at Sequoia who can help them in that crucible moment. I'm sorry,
I hate to interrupt you. How do you think about a crucible moment?
So a crucible moment is, I think of it as an inflection point. It's either a time where a company's in crisis or a time where there is a huge scalable opportunity for a company. And a Sequoia can bring knowledge or tools or resources to bear to either mitigate that massive valley or accelerate the steepness of the line. That's where we like to go. And so even though there's one Sequoia investor who's on the board, they benefit from the teamwork. So I said at the beginning, we value teamwork over showmanship. It means that when Alfred Lin is working with D&Co, which is a retail company, and they need engineering help, he can pull in Bill Corin, who used to run engineering and scaled engineering at Google, to help with that. Or let's say Pat Grady is working with Okta and they might need sales help. You can pull in Doug Leone. So it's really an all hands on deck throughout the life cycle of a company, but not like nitpicking all the way around. It's at a time when a founder is at a crucible moment and can really leverage that help.
Interesting. And then what happens inside a firm like yours where you guys value teamwork, you put the company and of course your the companies that you invest in first. And it's very clear having known you guys for so long that that's not just some bullshit on the wall, that's actually how you guys conduct yourselves. But at the same time, there's a rock star element to venture capital. The media loves to celebrate, and put out the lists and all that stuff. And so when you have, by way of example, Jim Getz, on the top of the Forbes list for multiple years in a row as what Forbes says is the number one guy in the world. And all the accolades in this case are going to him. And of course, back in the day, there was tons for Don and tons for Moritz and tons for Leone. And now the new generation is starting to get a lot of exposure themselves. And so you have these moments in the course of the life of the firm where for whatever reason, one of your partners, one of your investors gets singled out and celebrated and put up on a pedestal. What's that like for a firm that values the team over showmanship?
There's just a couple ways that manifests itself. One is we don't celebrate a whole lot. So it's literally, we can have a huge win one day. It's almost like it's ignored and we're on to the next thing. That's a little bit of paranoia and the work ethic.
So when a WhatsApp transaction goes down that is said to be one of the largest returns in venture capital history, there isn't a party at Sequoia. There isn't.
Certainly we were thrilled for Jan, but if I remember that one correctly, it was probably 3 weeks later that we did a toast, and we were literally on how can we help Jan? How can we celebrate him? How can we move on to the next company? It's always because we're only as good as the next company that we partner with. We're only as good as doing a service to all the companies we partner with every day. So it's great when those things happen, and we're certainly proud of the founder and the company, but we've got more work to do. So I think that's one. We don't celebrate a whole lot because we believe we're forward looking. We just are always looking to the future.
So is it like that Jay-Z song, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next?
It definitely feels that way at times. And then I think the other thing is we're lucky enough, the team is super small, and so much of the team is acknowledged externally that there isn't a kind of celebrity mentality with just one person. And And then I would say, I think it was Michael who started this, and Michael and Doug who have made it a really living, breathing thing. As we say, we don't like to use the I pronoun. We much prefer to use the we pronoun. So as we talk about helping companies internally, as we write emails, as we pitch new business, we really focus on the language you use as much as our actions. The place falls apart. It becomes a star culture. It just does, for two reasons. One, egos get in the way of work ethic, and that can't happen here. And two, just like you said at the beginning, one of the differentiators for Sequoia has been the generational transfer. And if you don't let the up and comers have a place, have opportunity, have an equal seat at the table to thrive, you can't make that generational transfer happen.
So let's touch on that a little bit, because it's something I find fascinating about Sequoia. A lot of firms of any kind don't make it from the founder to the next generation, and they certainly don't make it from the second generation to the third generation. And if I'm not, to quote our former President Bush, misunderestimating the situation, would it be fair to characterize Sequoia as sort of in the transition from the second generation to the third generation? Is that fair, Blair?
I'm not quite. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you've got the generational transfer accurately. And I think it's driven by the same principle that we look for founders. So, we love all entrepreneurs, but we're looking for that special entrepreneur that, one, wants to transform a market, and two, wants to have an enduring business. And you said it, they're mission driven. The leaders in Sequoia itself put the mission of us helping the daring founders build legendary companies and the mission of fueling great causes, meeting those nonprofit LPs, above their own personal gain. So it will be perceived as failure if you retire from Sequoia with just personal wealth and not the fact that you transmitted the tribal knowledge onto the next generation and you left the partnership in better shape than when you came.
Yeah, incredibly powerful. And how does losing play into the success of the firm?
Well, we really hate to lose. So it's probably that paranoia and the fear of being lapped by someone else. So certainly there is a competitive spirit that plays into it.
Really, I've never noticed that in any of my dealings with you guys.
It's interesting, but it's more in a desire to win for the company. This is the thing, is when like I said, I never wanted to run marketing for a venture firm. So when I started doing my due diligence on this job, one of the things I didn't really realize until I joined here is most venture firms are in business to make money. Now, I'm not to say that we don't want to make money, because being the largest shareholder in the most interesting companies serves our LPs well. But we really look for that independent thinker who has a brilliant new idea that wants to build an enduring company more than we're looking for the immediate dollar signs right in front of it. And that has to do with winning in the long term. It's a different definition of winning. And we will have lost if the companies we back don't transform the market, don't transform the world.
And so when you back a company that fails to design and dominate a category over time, that's obviously a loss. And you guys look to learn from that loss.
Yeah. And I think there's different degrees of, and I don't think we would say failure is bad, because you certainly learn from it. But it's pretty hard to be an enduring company if you're going to lose in your category.
Yeah, well, we know the category king takes all the economics. And what about in your own career? Walk me back past Stanford. You've had a hell of a career as a marketer. How is that trajectory for you over time? When you graduated school and it may
be
been on a twisty path that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I appreciate that. So people can't quite make out how I went to go work at General Mills, then worked at a couple startups, then worked at Schwab for 7 years. Then, for those who don't know, I helped reinvent the Academy of Sciences here in San Francisco, a science museum, then Stanford, then Sequoia, again, the common thread is two things. I like to work for organizations that don't want to rest on their laurels, and somehow they think I will be the ultimate nudge to make sure that they don't do that. And I might have a little bit of chutzpah and intelligence to bring together a pretty focused and integrated plan to drive that change. I think the other thing that I tell folks who ask me about, let's say they want to do marketing or be a general manager, I look for steep learning curves. And that's also what I think makes this place so alive, is there's no question that this organization has smart and hardworking people. But the other thing it has is people that are just thirsty for knowledge. And so for me, I've benefited from seeking opportunities where, yes, I could bring some skill, but there were also huge opportunity to learn and make my mark.
And on the personal side, I mean, I know enough about the role that you play and the firm that you play it in that to say that you could easily have a 180-hour work week every week is certainly the reality I know you're living. And so how do you manage your life outside of Sequoia, and how do you make it all work as somebody who I know lives a pretty full life outside of being the CMO of Sequoia?
Yeah, so I love my job, and my colleagues always, joke with me that I'm never leaving here, and I hope I don't, unless I can go make peace in the Middle East or run my own company.
As far as I know, we need a lot of help making peace in the Middle East, so I don't know, maybe you need to get the fuck over there.
I know, yeah, maybe I have to figure out how to make that happen. But so my family at home, I'm really lucky to have an incredible husband, Rick, who's a great teammate and an amazingly generous and loving guy. And then I'm a mom of two kids, Zoe and Luke, who are teenagers, 15 and 12. And I'm inspired. I'm inspired by them. And I work hard and I try to be focused so that they're proud of me.
And, how do you, you're Superwoman, right? I mean, no, really, I'm not a parent, right? So I don't know how you have a job like the one that you have and a marriage like the one that you have and be the mom that I know that you are. I mean, how do you make all that work?
So I think there's two things, and I'm not Superwoman by any stretch of the imagination. There are people, I only say that, there are people that work 2 and 3 jobs and still are incredible parents. So I always like to put my hat out to them who are struggling. I am so fortunate to have the life that I do. But there's 2 things that I say. One, my husband taught me related to work, which is have no regrets. So choose opportunities where you won't regret not trying. So that's really been one that I've held dear. And the other one is, make it your own, do it your own way until someone tells you can't. So a lot of times, at least with working parents, I hear people say, I can't take that job because it would be too many hours and I can't be home for my kids. Or I can't do this because the expectation is they'll want me to be this way. And what I've learned in my last few jobs is, and I was very upfront when I was interviewing, at least for this one, is I'm going to do this job my way. Which means, yes, I'm going to work hard, but I'm also going to make a 4:00 baseball game in the spring. And until my results aren't good, or until someone else tells me I'm not doing a good job, I'm going to do it my own way. And the worst thing that can happen is I'm going to have to dig deep and go find another job, which I don't mean to be cavalier about because I'm very, very fortunate to have it. But I think sometimes people in my type of jobs limit themselves before they create it in their own manner.
So you said to yourself, even if you didn't maybe use quite these words, that I'm going to design this job the way I want to design it in the context of my life, and I'm going to make that work. And if that doesn't work for you, then I need to be somewhere else.
Yeah, but I think I would stop short in that. If that doesn't work for you, tell me, and then I can personally assess how to adjust.
I can make it work. Fair enough. You're nicer about it than me. I just say, listen, I'm going to do this the way I'm going to do this, and if you like it, great, and if you don't, then go fuck yourself. But you're a way nicer human being than I am.
I don't know if it's nicer, but the reason why I say it is I don't want people who are less fortunate than I am. I work in a place that is open and creative and more flexible than others. I want people to take that attitude so they can design their own work to achieve the results they need to in their work and their life, and feel like there's some gray to adjust if they need to versus needing to bail right away.
So let's maybe unpack that a little bit. You walk into Sequoia, and am I correct, Blair? There'd never been a CMO at Sequoia, right?
No, actually, that's wrong. Mark Dempster was here for 10 years before me.
Oh, I didn't realize that. He was. I knew he was there, but I didn't realize he was in that kind of a role.
I think it was different. The business changed so much that when Mark decided to leave and I came in, the world had just changed. So Mark had been there for 10 years. And I think when he decided to go do something else and I came in, we just redefined the role based on the strategy and the results we wanted to achieve.
Got it. And so what's it like coming into a super high powered, super alpha, mega achieving result production place? And your job is actually to change things. How do you fit into the IQs in that place? I mean, I don't know. There's some people there who have such big brains, they need neck braces, and nobody's a wallflower to say the least. How do you fit into that kind of situation with super smart, super aggressive, super outspoken people?
Yeah, what I always say is that the common denominators at Sequoia are intellect, work ethic, and the third thing is actually uniqueness. So it was fairly easy. Is that there is not a cookie cutter profile of an investor or a cookie cutter profile of an executive here. In fact, everyone thinks differently and has different personal interests. So the third quality is you've just got to bring your own personality and point of view to the table. And as long as you're yourself and not an ass about it, it tends to work.
And then I'm also really curious to find out from you, Blair, what do you think it means to be a chief marketing officer today?
For me, the definition of marketing, I think sometimes people think it's PR or it's demand gen. For me, being a CMO means how can you bring your organization to market? It sounds really basic, right? And so depending on your business, depending on your target audience, that's going to mean different things to different CMOs. So a great CMO is someone who knows their audience inside out, knows their product inside out, and puts together the right integrated plan to connect those two. So the best CMOs I know are great general managers. They're super good listeners. And the last thing they are good learners, because the minute you start applying the same old playbook and the same old roadmap time and time again with the pace of change, you're dead.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, I mean, what's your take on category design?
Oh boy, Chris, that's yours to answer, not mine. I guess the number one thing I would say...
You're the practicing CMO. I'm the guy that got kicked to the curb and, doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, no, I think the thing I would say is just like you do is... I don't know if I know your research says that, it's the category king or nothing. What I would say is you can be the category king, queen, or maybe jack and survive. But I think if you are in a category that is incredibly noisy and you don't jump to those 1, 2, or 3 or fast, you might as well, change your business model and go home way sooner rather than later. And I think it comes back to build a great category. It just goes back to the basics of know your audience, know your product, and be super smart about connecting the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think of the skill sets that are required for a modern day CMO?
Certainly needs to be a balance of analytical and creative. Depending on the business that you're in, you're going to need to weight one of those more than the other. A good general manager, a good people manager, it all depends on the people you can hire and motivate to get the job done. And I think the last thing is a really good influencer or partner to your board and your peers, most specifically in data science and sales.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Blair?
Thank you. And I would just say that anybody listening to this podcast can certainly, or is probably a legend. If you're listening to this, you probably are a legend, and it'll take all of us to help each other maintain that legendary status. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Blair. I do think you're legendary. I've seen the job that you've done at Sequoia. It's been fantastic. And I love the way you carry yourself. I think of you as a velvet hammer. You're on one hand, you're very affable and open and approachable and very kind. And on the other hand, I know what kind of results you're capable of producing. And when it's required, you're going to lay the hammer down if necessary.
I'll wear the velvet hammer proudly. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much. It's been great having a conversation with you today, Blair. And I hope to see you in person soon.
Okay. Thanks. Take care, Chris.
You too. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Blair Shane.
That was great.
So glad she came on and was so generous. All right. We would like to ask you to please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and or YouTube.
This podcast is not free. It costs you 2 minutes to give us a legendary review.
You can find us on Facebook.com/groups/legends and losers.
And on the Twitter at Legends Losers.
You can email us blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. And we would like to thank Equity Directory, the invite-only network of entrepreneurs and startup talent exchanging work for equity.
HarperCollins Instant Classic Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets.
OneLifeFullyLived.org, dream, plan, and live your best life.
Sequoia Capital, we help the daring build legendary companies.
Zoom, Zoom.us, or do you think that's .us?
.us.
We shoot the show on Zoom. We think they're awesome.
Whiskey, make yourself a little frisky.
Kiva.org, loans that change lives.
Mike Block, the Santa Cruz realtor who makes dreams happen. MikeBlock.com.
Marburn Academy in New Albany, Ohio, devoted to serving bright students with learning differences.
Wealth Can't Wait, the awesome new book from our friend David Osborne.
And the town of Santa Cruz, California, where wackadoo never rests. We'd like to remind you that today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes and that this oddcast was produced in a factory containing nuts.
This oddcast is the sole property of Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and please share the shit out of it.
The producers of this oddcast, yeah. The producers of this oddcast are very handsome.
Teach entrepreneurship.
There's no such thing as a participation award, and support your local venture capitalist.
Subscribe on Stitcher.
You can't be a legend without being a loser.
That was way more than an hour of your life you'll never get back.
And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together.
So nicely, bro.
And our deepest apologies to Justin Bieber. Sorry, Beeb, we just ran out of time for you.
That's it. Be legendary, people.